We've challenged ourselves to visit the 12 featured locations in the 2023 Beautiful England calendar on our motorbikes during the month that they feature in said calendar. June marks a halfway point of this self-imposed challenge, and our destination is Old Harry Rocks down in Dorset. While trying to avoid motorways as much as possible, the quickest route would make this trip very similar to our run down to Brighton in May. So we had a bit of a look around and tweaked it a bit to give ourselves a change of scenery. A run through the Cotswolds would allow us to stop for a break in Stow On The Wold on our way south, a very scenic town that we try to pop into whenever we're in the area. We would then carry on south past Swindon to visit Stonehenge, a location that my mother swears I've been to when I was just about old enough to walk, but I can't remember for the life of me. We have found a way to avoid paying the £20 per person entry fee and £5 for parking, so stick around for that if you want to find out how to see the site for free. After Stonehenge, it would be on to our first campsite since 2019 to pitch up our tent and lighten our loads before heading on to Studland for a walk up to the White Cliffs of Dorset. The following day would be Father's Day, and we arranged to meet my parents at a biker cafe outside Chipping Campden. We had also found a route in our most regularly read book, Bikers Britain, that would lead us north through the country. The weather was forecasting rain from late on Saturday evening all through Sunday, so we packed our waterproofs and mentally prepared to be camping in some mud. We started our journey with only a bit of motorway along the M69 and onto the A46 around Coventry to join the A429 that would lead us to the Cotswolds. We hit rain pretty soon after joining the A46 and started thinking about how long we should leave it until we put our waterproofs on. Luckily, the rain wasn't cold or heavy enough to be uncomfortable, and it passed before we got to the junction with the A429. Unfortunately though, this road was not without its own issues, as it seemed that several festivals were running today along that route, as we regularly found ourselves in queues of people trying to get to Rail Live. There are also big lines of traffic through Moreton in the Marsh and into Stow itself, as it's a sunny weekend so people are going to the Cotswolds for the day. Luckily, motorbikes make finding parking quite a bit easier, and there is plenty of free on-street parking around the town centre. We parked up and went to explore St Edward's Church, as we had learned that this was the location of a very picturesque door that we've both seen numerous times across social media. Nicknamed the Tolkien Door, this wooden portal apparently inspired the Doors of Durin from Fellowship of the Ring. There's no real evidence to support this claim other than Tolkien was known to visit the Cotswolds regularly, but you can see the similarities. Apparently the trees were planted there to make the doorway look a little bit nicer, and it just kind of got out of hand. They certainly did enhance the aesthetics though. After stopping for some coffee, we headed back out into the sunshine. Shortly after leaving Stow, we left the A429 and joined the A424, carrying us along less busy roads that offered some fancy views of the surrounding countryside and having enough corners and dips to keep the journey engaging. The 424 becomes the 361 in Barford and marks the end of the Cotswolds area of natural beauty, although this didn't affect our enjoyment of the roads. The 361 eventually joins the A419 at Swindon, and it's here that we made our first fuel stop of the day. After topping up on petrol, we joined the A346 heading south into the North Wessex Downs area of natural beauty. We followed this road until we reached Marlborough and joined the A345. These roads were not quite as scenic as the Cotswold leg of the route, but other than Marlborough we encountered little to no notable traffic, leaving us to take our time and enjoy the ride. This route also led us near to some military bases, evidenced by the numerous tank crossing points that we encountered. We didn't see any tanks though, unfortunately. Our destination was a dead end adjacent to an army housing estate in the garrison town of Larkhill. This dead end has no parking restrictions and eventually becomes a dirt track that runs for around 1 mile until it reaches the historical site of Stonehenge. We've seen photos and videos of vehicles travelling along this dirt track, and satellite photos show this too, but we arrived to find a big road closed sign and a locked gate. We parked up the bikes and got ourselves ready for a bit of a walk. It only took us about 15 minutes, but this is a little bit harder wearing extra layers of motorcycle gear. This path leads right up to where paying visitors to Stonehenge get dropped off from their coaches, and the free footpath you are on runs directly parallel to the one that costs £20 to get to. There's also a third footpath directly next to this other one, but all of them offer the same view of the monument. True enough, the 3 footpaths do not encircle the monument, so you only get a view from one side, but me being a cynical and tight-fisted bastard didn't think that seeing the stones from the other side would be worth £40 plus a fiver for parking. It didn't take us long to get an opportunity to grab some photos without other people in the way, and we set off back along the track to return to the bikes. With Stonehenge ticked off the list, we jumped on the A360 down to Salisbury, which is nothing but straight roads and got pretty boring rather quickly. Around Salisbury, we joined the A354 down to Blandford Forum before taking the A350 and A31 down to Bear Regis, our next scheduled stop and our campsite for the night. We were stopping at Wooders Camping just outside Bear Regis, as this was the only site in the area that specifically listed motorcycle friendly on their pitch up profiles. They call themselves a wild campsite, which normally means you can pitch up wherever you want and there's probably a long drop toilet on site. If you're lucky, there'll be a tap to wash up with too. This place though had portaloos that were regularly cleaned, shower blocks, which we didn't try, and proper sinks to wash up in, and a bar that opened up in the evenings serving local tipples such as IPAs and spiced rum. We picked out a spot, set up the tent ready to collapse in later, and then headed back out with significantly lighter bikes. It was still early evening at this point, and our parking spot to visit the rocks was about half an hour away from the campsite. The road the campsite was on is incredibly straight until it gets to Wareham, which is where the theme changed to stretches of road between roundabouts. We eventually passed through Corfe Castle, which I had planned on working into our route for the day but forgot all about. The ruins of the castle make for an impressive reveal around the corner, and we may be able to fit a proper visit in during one of our other trips for the year. From Corfe Castle it's all smaller roads, though almost none of it was narrow enough to be of any real worry. The twisty route reminded us of Little Cornwall roads, except the visibility is much better here. We made note of a viewpoint on our way through and soon found ourselves at the South Beach car park outside Studland. We didn't see any ticket machines or any signs mentioning them, so we assumed the parking was free, left some of our kit with the bikes and headed off for a walk. It was a similar walk to Stonehenge in terms of time and distance, so with about 15 minutes we found ourselves on the top of Old Harry Rocks. We couldn't quite recreate the calendar shot as that was taken with a drone, but we did the best we could with wide angle cameras and some selfies. Considering we were atop a cliff on the coast, it was extremely quiet there. The air was almost still and you could hear the plopping of the gentle waves against the rocks beneath us. We caught our breath and let the scenery take it away again until we headed back along the trail. The Banks' Arms is located right next to the car park, so we decided to pop in there for some pudding and coffee before heading back to the campsite for dinner. If you ever find yourself on this walk from the pub to the cliffs, keep an eye out for the little gaps in the hedgerows. Some of them lead out to other cliff tops, offering views of Bournemouth in the distance. Luckily, the forecasted rain never came, making both dinner and breakfast much less of a hassle. Other than washing the remnants of pasta sauce out of the dishes in the morning, everything remained dry and ready to pack away. With the bikes loaded up, we stopped for fuel in Bear Regis, which is a strong contender for steepest forecourt in Britain, after Frey couldn't find an angle where her bike wouldn't fall over without her actively stopping it. As mentioned earlier, our route home would be slightly different, and on the recommendation of the Bikers Britain book, we would be taking the A350 from Blandford Forum north to Warminster, passing through the town of Shaftesbury, which is famous for having a hill which was once in a bread advert that aired before a significant portion of the voting population were born. The roads passed around and through several small villages, making for some tight corners and steep hills, but none of these were a challenge as we were repeatedly stuck behind cars that refused to come within about 15 miles per hour of the speed limit. As we jealously watched faster and less laden bikes zip around the obstacles, we kept plodding along and keeping an eye on the erratic brake lights of whichever car was in front of us. Luckily, these people did speed up a touch for the more gentle corners, letting us get some good swoopy leaning in. We had planned a break at a garden centre just south of Warminster, but upon arriving we found that to keep our 2 PM appointment with my parents, we wouldn't really have time to stop here. So after a quick sip of water, we continued north. Our next stop was about an hour away in Cirencester, where I had picked out a Greggs where we could get a little something to keep us going if we needed it. This proved to be the hardest leg of the day as the Sunday drivers were out in force. Continuing along the A350 and then the A329, there is nothing to recommend about this route, other than it gets you to Cirencester, but I've never been to the town itself, so I can't say whether getting there is a benefit to anyone or not. Coming out of Warminster, there were some nice roads, but they soon fell into a rhythm of town, single lane, series of roundabouts. The single lane roads are twisty enough to make overtaking opportunities a rarity, and being once again stuck behind overly cautious drivers meant paying constant attention to brake lights. The 1 hour long ride felt like it had taken closer to 3, and we treated ourselves to a cheeky Greggs before filling up the bikes for the last time on the trip. The trip between Cirencester and Chipping Campden was made up of several very straight roads, but they were wide open and went up and down quite a bit, which was exactly what we needed after the last leg. We especially enjoyed the huge downhill and uphill on the A429 at Fossbridge, a 14% downhill that leads into a couple of gentle corners before climbing back up a 14% incline. A very enjoyable, albeit brief, bit of road that we were surprised not to see any other bikes on. We eventually arrived back in Stow On The Wold and passed through to join the A424 towards Evesham. Luckily, we had no other traffic on the road to share with, so we could enjoy the tree-lined stretches of tarmac at our leisure until we turned onto the B4081 into Chipping Campden, which has the excellent speed deterrent of a very steep hill with tight turns on it. Chipping Campden itself is a town straight out of a postcard and a strong competitor for the town that could be used as the best example of a Cotswold town. Out the other side of here is an industrial estate which is home to Cotti Autotali, where as well as t-shirts, watches and motorcycles you could also buy coffees and toasties. My parents were there waiting for us, ready to tell us all about their recent trip to Japan, though most of the conversation was about how good the toilets are over there. After a couple of hours of catching up, we suited up and headed back towards Coventry on the A429, returning on the same route we had taken the day before. So that's yet another trip in the bag, and that puts us on the halfway point for the year. We did notice a little bit of an oil leak on Frey's bike, which we'll need looking at, but other than that, it's looking like we might actually be able to manage all 12 trips. That said, the destination for next month is Hindhope Lynn Waterfall in the Kildahead National Nature Reserve. Took me 5 or 6 goes to pronounce that properly, right up next to the Scottish border. As the crow rides, this is the furthest stop away from us, so we figure if we can manage this one, we can manage the rest. Though we do have to go to the Lake District in December, but that's a problem for future us.